So in today's class, mainly we'll focus on the SSH protocols, that is the user authentication protocol and the connection protocol. So first one is the SSH user authentication protocol. So this protocol basically provides the means by which the client is authenticated to the server. And there are various message types and formats that will be used in this user authentication protocol. So the first one is the message wherein the authentication requests occur from the client, and this message will have the format SSH_message_user authentication, that is AUTH_request. So this is the format of the authentication request from the client. The second message is the SSH message user authentication success, and you have another message that is SSH_message_user authentication failure. So we will look at each of this in much detail. So the first one is SSH message user authentication request. So this format basically has a byte, then it has the message format which is given here, and you have this decimal number 50. Okay, so this basically corresponds to the byte with a decimal value 50. So we can say that this message is having a byte, that is the first byte with the decimal value of 50. So under this message, you can see there are various other parameters. So this is a string username, string service name, string method name. Similarly, it goes on, and various method specification fields. So here, this username basically corresponds to the authorization identity the client is going to be claiming. The service name corresponds to the facility to which the client is requesting access, mainly the facility corresponding to the SSH connection protocol. The method name is the authentication method being used in this particular request. Now, if the server either rejects the authentication request or accepts the request, it will require one or more authentication methods. So the server will send a message with the format which is shown as SSH_message_user authentication_failure. So this message has the format with a byte, then you have a name list, then you have a Boolean value, or a Boolean value with the partial success. So basically this name list is the list of various methods that may be used to continue the dialogue. So if the server accepts this authentication, it will send a authentication success message. And if you look at this particular message, you can see that this message is having a decimal value 51. So as I mentioned, if this name list basically corresponds to the list of various methods, right? So if the server accepts the authentication, it will send a SSH message corresponding to the success. So let us look at the message corresponding to the success. You can see that this message is SSH_message_user authentication success, which will be having a decimal value 52. So these are the three message types mainly. First, a request is made by the client. Then you have a decision taken whether the authentication was a success or a failure. If it was a success, then you can see the message that is there here will be displayed. If not, it will be the message corresponding to the failure. Now, let us look into the various steps that are involved in this exchange of these messages. So we have the first step. Here, the client will send the authentication request message with the requested method of none. Secondly, the server will check to determine if the username is valid. If it is not, the server will return a SSH user authentication failure with the partial success value of false. If the username is valid, the server will proceed to the step 3. In the step 3, the server will return a user authentication failure with a list of one or more authentication methods to be used. In the step 4, the client will select one of the acceptable authentication methods and it will send a SSH message user authentication request with that method name and the required method specific fields. Now at this point, what happens is that there may be a sequence of exchanges to perform in the method. Okay. So next step would be, if the authentication succeeds and more authentication methods are required, the server will proceed to the step 3, that is by sending the server return user authentication failure message using a partial success value of true. If the authentication fails, the server will proceed to the step 3, but in this case with a partial success value of false. Previously, it would proceed to the step 3 with the partial success value of true, but now if the authentication fails, it will proceed to the step 3 using a partial success value of false. Finally, we have the message when all the required authentication methods are succeeded, the server will send a SSH message user authentication success and the authentication protocol is complete. So these are the steps basically involved in the message exchange. Next, let us look into the various authentication methods. Now, generally, the server may require one or more authentication methods, but here we are going to specify the 3 authentication methods. The first one is the public key, the second one is the password, and the third one is host based. In the first one, that is the public key, basically in this, the details of this method basically will depend upon the public key algorithm that we choose. So here, the client will send a message to the server that contains the client that will contain the client's public key with the message that is signed by the client's private key. So when the server receives this message, it will check whether the supplied key is acceptable for authentication. And if it is acceptable, it will check whether the signature is correct or not. In the second method, that is the password method, the client will send a message containing a plain text password, which is protected by encryption by the transport layer protocol. So last one, that is the host based. Here the authentication is performed on the client's host rather than the client itself. So this way what happens is that a host will support multiple clients by providing authentication for all its clients. And this method works by having the client send a signature which is created with the private key of the client host rather than directly verifying the user's identity. So the SSH server will verify the identity of the client host, and then it will believe the host when it says that the user has been already authenticated on the client side. So these are the 3 authentication methods that we have: public key, password, and the host based. So that completes the user authentication protocol. Next, we have the SSH connection protocol. So this SSH connection protocol, it runs on the SSH transport layer protocol and assumes that a secure authentication connection is in use. So that secure authentication connection usually will be referred to as a tunnel, which is used by the connection protocol in order to multiplex a number of logical channels. So let us look into the channel mechanism. All types of communication using SSH, such as termination session, are supported using the separate channels. So either side may open a channel, that is the client and the server. So for each channel, each side associates a unique channel number which need not be the same on both the ends, that is from the client side or the server. And generally these channels are flow controlled using a window mechanism. So no data may be sent to a channel until a message is received to indicate that the window space is available. So mainly, if you look at the channel mechanism, here you can see that there is a terminal session and we can support multiple separate channels, and either side, that is the client and the server, can open a channel, and each side will have a unique channel number. Now, let us look into the life of a channel. So, the life of a channel progresses mainly through 3 stages. That is, opening a channel, data transfer, closing a channel. So let us see the first stage, that is opening a new channel. So when either side, that is the client or the server, wishes to open a new channel, it will allocate a local number for the channel and then sends a message which will be of the form byte SSH underscore message underscore channel underscore open. So if you see, this message has various parameters that are involved. So this parameter UINT32, this basically indicates that it's an unsigned 32-bit integer value. It's an unsigned 32-bit integer value. Next, you have the channel type, which will identify the application for the channel. Then you have the sender channel, which is the local channel number. Then you have the initial window size. So this basically specifies how many bytes of channel data can be sent to the sender of this message without adjusting the window. Then you have maximum packet size, which will specify the maximum size of an individual data packet that can be sent to the sender. Now, for example, say one might want to use smaller packets for any interactive connections to get better interactive response on slow links. So in such cases, we will be using all these parameters. Now, if the remote side is able to open the channel, then we have the message which will be specified as SSH message channel underscore open confirmation. So this message will include the sender's channel number, the recipient's channel number, and a window as well as the packet size values for the incoming traffic. Otherwise, say the remote side is not able to open the channel, then the remote side will send a message mentioning SSH underscore message underscore channel underscore open underscore failure with the reason code including indicating the reason for the failure. Now, so these are the steps that are involved in opening a channel. First, we are going to send this message either from the client side or the server side, because either of them can open the channel. So once it is able to open, it will return a open confirmation message. If it's unable to open a channel, then it will send a message which says it's a failure. Once the channel is open, the next step would be the data transfer. So here the data transferred is performed using SSH underscore message underscore channel underscore data. So here this indicates and includes the recipient's channel number and a block of data that will be transferred. Now these both messages that I specified, opening a channel and data transfer, can occur in both directions. Okay, so this may continue as long as the data transfer may continue as long as the channel is open. Either the client can send the message data transfer to the server, or the server can send the information to the client. Now, once the data transfer is complete, when either side wishes, like either the client or the server wishes to close a channel, it will send a close channel message. This close channel message will be represented as SSH underscore message underscore channel underscore close, which will include the recipient's channel number. So now all these three stages of the life of a channel and how it progresses, that is from opening of a channel to data transfer to closing a channel, can be indicated in this particular diagram. So this diagram basically shows you the SSH connection protocol message exchange that happens. So you can see here, we have the client and we have the server. So first one, establish authenticated transport layer connection, that is done. Then we want to open a channel. So in this case, in this particular message exchange diagram, you can see the client is the one which is requesting the server for a channel open, and the server is confirming by saying confirmation message. Then the data transfer is occurring between the client and the server. So initially the client was the one who sends the block of data to the server, and this thing continues. So after it finishes, and if any one of them wishes to close a channel, so in this case it is the client who wishes to close the channel, it will send a channel close message to the server. So basically these are the three processes or three stages that are involved in the SSH connection protocol message exchange: open a channel, data transfer, and close a channel. So next we will look into the types of channels. So basically there are 4 channel types which are recognized in the SSH connection protocol specifications. So the first one is the session, second one is X11, third one is forwarded TCP IP, and the fourth one is direct TCP IP. So first one that we have is the session, wherein this will correspond to the remote execution of a program, and the program may be a shell, okay, an application such as a file transfer or an email, a system command, or some built-in subsystem. So once a session channel is opened, the subsequent requests are sent, that is to transfer the data, to close the channel, or so on. And these requests will be used to start the remote program. The second channel type is X11. So this refers to X Windows system, which is a computer software system and a network protocol that will provide a graphical user interface basically for the network computers. So here this will allow applications to run on a network server, but to be displayed on the desktop machine. The third one is the forwarded TCP IP. This is basically a remote port forwarding. And the direct TCP IP is a local port forwarding. So let us look into what is this remote port forwarding and local port forwarding. Before that, we need to understand what is port forwarding. So port forwarding basically is one of the most useful features of the secure shell, that is the SSH. And this basically provides the ability to convert an insecure TCP connection into a secure SSH connection. And this is referred to as the SSH tunneling. So port forwarding means it will convert insecure TCP connection into a secure SSH connection. So if we want to better understand what is port forwarding, first we need to know what a port is. So port basically is an identifier of a user of TCP. So any application that runs on the TCP, on top of the TCP, will have a port number. So incoming TCP traffic will be delivered to the appropriate application on the basis of this particular port number. So an application may have multiple port numbers, but mainly what we need to understand is that it's an identifier of the user of the TCP. So any incoming TCP traffic will be delivered to the appropriate application on the basis of this particular port number. So as an example, if I have to give you, say, simple mail transfer protocol, that is SMTP. So in this, what happens is that the server side generally will listen on the port 25. So any incoming SMTP request will use the TCP and the addresses that the data has to go to the destination port 25. And the TCP will recognize that this is an SMTP server address and it will route the data to the SMTP server application. So let us look into much detailing of the port forwarding. Okay, so just to recall what we just mentioned just now in terms of port forwarding is used to convert an insecure TCP connection into a secure SSH connection. So here the SSH transport layer protocol will establish a TCP connection between the SSH client and the server, and the client traffic will be redirected to a local SSH. It will travel via the tunnel, then it will remote. SSH delivers the data to the server. So let us understand the concept of port forwarding by looking into the diagrams, wherein we have the first figure which shows you the connection via the TCP, the second diagram which shows you the connection via the SSH channel. So here, first one, let us look into the first one first, that is the connection via the TCP. So here you can see we have a client application that is identified by a port number X. Okay, you can see here. Let me just highlight it. So you can see we have the client application that is identified by the port number X and a server application that is identified by the port number Y. So here at some point the client will invoke the local TCP entity and it will request a connection to the remote server on port Y. So the local TCP entity will negotiate a TCP connection with the remote TCP entity. So this connection will link the port X to the remote port Y. But this kind of connection is insecure. So you can see that is why we have specified that it's an insecure TCP connection. So we have the client application with the port number X connected to the port number Y on the remote side, but the connection is insecure. Now let us look into the second figure, that is the connection established via the SSH tunnel. So here for this secure connection, so you can see that we have SSH being configured so that the SSH transport layer protocol establishes a TCP connection between the SSH client and the server entity. So with the port numbers in this case specified as A and B respectively. So port A corresponds to the client entity, whereas port B corresponds to the remote server entity. So here a secure SSH tunnel, you can see, right? A secure SSH tunnel is established over the TCP connection. So the traffic from the client X is redirected to the local SSH. Okay, so the traffic from the client X is redirected to the local SSH entity, and it will travel through the tunnel where the remote SSH entity delivers the data to the server application on the port Y. So instead of using the insecure TCP connection directly, we have the secure SSH tunnel with an inclusion of the SSH entity both at the client and the server side. Now this, in a similar manner, we can redirect the traffic from the server to the client. So you can see it's a two-way communication. That's why the arrow marks are marked this manner. So this is about the concept of port forwarding, which includes the secure SSH tunnel. Now let us look into the types of port forwarding. So there are two types mainly. We have the local port forwarding and we have the remote port forwarding. Local port forwarding is wherein this is considered to be the hijacker's process. So it will hijack the selected traffic. Remote forwarding is wherein the client acts for the server, or I can say the SSH client acts on the server's behalf. So let us look into each of them in detail. So first one is the local forwarding, or simply local port forwarding, or simply local forwarding. So here, this will allow the client to set up a hijacker process as I specified earlier. So this will intercept selected application level traffic and redirect it from an unsecured TCP connection to a secure SSH tunnel. SSH is configured to listen on the selected ports. So SSH will grab all the traffic using a selected port and it will send it through an SSH tunnel. On the other end, what happens is that the SSH server will send the incoming traffic to the destination port, which is dictated by the client application. Now, with these statements, it may not be much clear. So let us look into an example and see how this happens. So here is an example wherein if we consider that we have an email client on our desktop and we are going to use it to get an email from the mail server via the POP, that is Post Office Protocol. So the assigned port number for the POP3 in this case is port 110. Now let us see how we can try to secure this. So here is a diagram you can see this is your home PC. This is the server. Here is a firewall. This is the local port 110 to the SSH. So first what we are going to do is the SSH client will set up a connection to the remote server. So you can see this SSH client is trying to set up a connection to the remote server. Then we are going to select an unused local port number. In this case, I've considered to be 9999. And we are going to configure SSH to accept the traffic from this port, which will be destined for port 110 on the server. So the SSH client informs the SSH server to create a connection to the destination. In this case, it will be the mail server port 110. So the client will take any bits that are sent to the local port 9999 and it will send them to the server inside the encrypted SSH session. So the SSH server will decrypt the incoming bits and sends the plain text to the port 110. In the other direction, that is here, the SSH server will take any bits that are received from the port 110, sends them inside the SSH session back to the client, who will decrypt and send them to the process connected to the port 999. So this way we can communicate from home PC to the server, and this process will be called as local forwarding. Next we have the remote forwarding. So as I specified earlier, here the user's SSH client acts on the server's behalf, and the client will receive the traffic with the given destination port number. It will place the traffic on the correct port and sends it to the destination the user chooses to send. So with an example, let us see. So in this example, we will consider that we want to access at work from the home computer. Okay. So because the work server is behind a firewall, it will not accept any SSH request from the home computer. But from work, we can set up an SSH tunnel using remote forwarding. So let us see what are the steps that are involved in this case. So first, what we are going to do is, you can see here, we have the office PC. We have a corporate firewall because we cannot directly access this way because of the presence of the corporate firewall. This is the internet. This is the home PC. So from the work computer, first what we are going to do is, we will set up an SSH connection to the home computer. Now this firewall will allow this because it is a protected outgoing connection. It's an SSH connection, right? So it's a protected outgoing connection. So the firewall will allow this. Next, what we are going to do is, we will try to configure the SSH server to listen on the port 22. So this is basically making use of the port 22. So we will make the SSH server, which is present remotely, to listen on the port 22, that is the local port, and to deliver the data across the SSH connection, which will be addressed to the port, say in this case 2222. So now what we can do is, you can go now to your home computer and configure the SSH to accept the traffic on the port 2222. So you can see that you now have an SSH tunnel that can be used for remote login. Because of the presence of the remote server, because you have established a connection between a secure connection between the office PC and home PC over the port 22, using the port 2222, which is the remote port, we can easily access the information. So you can see that you have an SSH tunnel that can be used to remotely log in onto your work PC or the office PC. So this is regarding remote forwarding. So you can see the difference here in terms of the presence of the remote server, whereas when you looked into the local forwarding, you didn't have the presence of the remote server there.